Darian's hand trembled as the first shafts of dawn lit the valley. He had crossed hundreds of miles to reach this settlement, a mission etched in his mind like a cold promise: destroy. And yet, as the wind carried the scent of fire smoke and pine, he felt a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with fear. The village lay below him, quiet, almost innocent. Children laughed softly by the river, women wove baskets under the shade of towering oaks, and the men, unaware of the threat hovering in the hills, prepared for the day. Darian's dark eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned each figure, noting movements, weapons, and routines. And then he saw her. Sani stood alone by the water's edge, her long black hair catching the sunlight, the intricate beadwork of her dress glinting with every subtle motion. Her skin glowed with a warm golden hue, and her eyes, deep, dark, and unwavering, looked not at him, but somewhere far beyond the valley. She moved with a quiet confidence, every step precise, purposeful, as if she owned the land she walked on. Darian's hand, which had never hesitated over a bow or spear, shook. He tightened his grip instinctively, telling himself it was the cold, the tension, the miles traveled. But the moment their eyes briefly met, a spark he could not name ignited inside him. He dropped to a low crouch behind a ridge, forcing his breathing to slow. He had trained for this, years of hunting, years of preparation. He knew how to kill, and yet he could not reconcile the image of Sani, the woman with fire in her eyes and a calm that unnerved him, with the orders that had driven him to this land. Minutes passed. He observed her as she knelt to fill a clay pot at the river. Her fingers moved with gentle precision, her hair falling across her face, catching the light in a way that made her seem almost ethereal. He had been trained to see the world in terms of threat and strategy, yet he found himself analyzing every small gesture, every flicker of emotion in her expression. Darian's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shout from the village, children calling to one another. Laughter mingled with the slap of bare feet on earth. He tensed, reminded of his purpose, and yet a reluctant admiration grew. Sani's presence felt like a challenge to everything he believed. That afternoon, as the sun climbed high, Darian observed from a distant ridge. Sani walked along the path leading to a grove, carrying her clay pot with practiced ease. Her movements were fluid, graceful, and deliberate. When she paused to listen to the wind, her head tilted slightly, revealing a scar on her neck. Faint, but deliberate. A mark of past battles, perhaps. Or a story told silently. Darian felt a knot in his stomach. He had expected fear, defiance, anger from the people he was to destroy. But this woman, she radiated a quiet strength that made him question his mission. Night fell, and Darian remained hidden, watching as the village lit torches and gathered around a communal fire. Sani's voice rose in song, haunting and melodic, carrying across the night air. Each note seemed to pierce his resolve, twisting it into confusion, fascination, and an unfamiliar pull toward something he had no name for. He had been taught to think in terms of targets and objectives, but Sani made him reconsider. How could a single human being hold such sway over a man whose life had been consumed by duty and violence? As the embers of the fire glowed, Sani's silhouette moved gracefully among her people, her eyes scanning the crowd with a subtle authority. She laughed softly at a child's joke, bending slightly to ruffle hair, and Darian realized with a jolt. She had no idea of the storm that hovered above her, and yet she commanded his attention in a way no one ever had. Darian's hand again shook. He had come to kill, and yet he found himself questioning every step, every choice that had led him here. And as the night deepened, with the moon casting silver across the river, he made a decision that would mark the beginning of a path he could never foresee. He would stay, not for duty, not for honor, but because Sani had awakened something within him that neither battle nor bloodshed could silence. For the first time in his life, Darian wondered if a man could be torn between killing and protecting, and if, in the shadow of that choice, he might discover something more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. The morning mist clung to the valley like a veil, softening the edges of the village and painting the river in silvery light. Darien had not slept. He had stayed hidden among the trees, his mind restless, replaying Sani's song, the curve of her shoulders, the way her hair had caught the moonlight last night. He had trained himself to ignore distractions, to focus on the mission. But Sani was not a distraction. She was a storm he could not resist. And for the first time, he feared that his own heart was as dangerous as any weapon he carried. He watched her move through the village at dawn, guiding a group of women carrying bundles of herbs. There was a rhythm to her motion, a quiet authority that required no force. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned every movement around her, yet they softened when a child stumbled near her. She knelt instinctively, brushing dust from the small boy's clothes and smiling. A simple gesture, but enough to unseat every calculation Darien had rehearsed. He shifted his position, careful not to make a sound. The ridge beneath him offered a vantage point, but it also trapped him in observation, forcing him to notice every detail. Sani's dress shimmered with beads, her hair braided in intricate patterns, a single feather tucked behind her ear. There was grace in everything she did, even in the mundane, lifting a basket, tying a bundle, laughing quietly. A sudden commotion drew his attention. A hunter returning from the forest, his hands full of game. Villagers clustered around, murmuring, smiling, praising him. Sani's voice rose, clear and commanding, issuing directions with ease. Darien's chest tightened. Here she was, surrounded by her people, completely unaware of the man who had been sent to destroy them, and yet commanding the attention of everyone around her. He could feel the conflict coiling inside him. Duty demanded he strike, that he prepared to unleash what he had been trained for. Yet another part of him, the part that had always been quiet, unnoticed, locked behind rigid control, urged him to approach, to speak, to simply exist near her without harm. By mid-morning, Darien descended closer to the village, hidden by the folds of the land. He paused behind a stand of oaks, watching Sani as she knelt to help a woman lift a bundle of dried corn. A small smile touched her lips, a fleeting moment that made his pulse thrum painfully in his chest. He did not notice the small footfall behind him until a twig snapped under weight. He froze, senses sharpening. Then a young boy emerged, carrying a basket of berries. Darien held his breath. The boy approached Sani, who laughed softly and accepted the basket with a nod. Darien exhaled silently, but the intrusion reminded him how close he was, too close, and how fragile the balance of observation was. The day stretched on, heavy with unspoken tension. Darien remained at the edge of the village, hiding in shadow and foliage, as Sani moved through the daily tasks of her people. She was everything the stories he had heard about the Apache strength and spirit embodied in one person, beautiful, fierce, nurturing, and unknowable. As dusk approached, Darien found himself at the river again, watching Sani as she walked barefoot along the water's edge. Her reflection shimmered in the rippling current. He could see the faint scar on her neck again, and it made him wonder about her history, the battles she had survived, the pain she had endured. Each detail made her more human, more dangerous in a way he could not quantify. For the first time, he felt the ache of uncertainty. He had been a soldier, a hunter, a weapon, and yet here he was, hiding from a woman who had no idea of the threat hovering above her village. He wanted to speak, to warn her, to protect her in defiance of his orders. And yet, the rules of his life, the mission that had defined him, anchored him in silence. Night fell, painting the sky with a million stars. Sani sat alone by the fire, her face illuminated by the soft glow. She hummed a tune, simple and haunting, one that seemed to reach across the distance to touch Darien's hidden presence. He could feel the weight of his own breathing, the heat of his palms as he clenched them into fists. He had not been this conflicted in years, not even during battles that demanded life or death decisions. The wind shifted, carrying her scent toward him, smoky from the fire, earthy from the river, tinged with the faint sweetness of the herbs she had handled all day. He closed his eyes, his pulse hammering in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, to obey orders, to maintain control. But another, louder instinct urged him forward, Darian made a decision, slow and deliberate. He would not act today, nor tomorrow, not yet. But he would learn her movements, her habits, her heart. He would understand the woman who had made a warrior question his purpose. And as he retreated to the shadows of the forest, he allowed himself a single thought, one he could not voice to anyone. He did not know if he could kill her people, and if he could not, then what was left for a man who had been sent to destroy? The village woke to the scent of smoke and the soft cries of children before dawn. Darian remained hidden, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the settlement, watching Sani move among her people. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, gathering firewood, tending to the children, checking the traps set along the riverbank. Every action seemed infused with purpose, yet effortless in its execution. Darian's heart thudded in ways he could not explain. He had seen many warriors, fought countless battles, yet Sani's presence made him feel exposed, vulnerable in a way that startled him. He had trained his mind to see only targets and threats, but she was neither. She was a force of nature that demanded attention without demanding it, a calm in the chaos that drew him in despite himself. By mid-morning, Sani moved toward a grove of oaks, carrying a bundle of herbs. Darian followed from a distance, careful not to be noticed. He noted the way her hands moved, precise and practiced, how her dark eyes scanned the environment, always alert, yet never anxious. A faint scar along her forearm caught his attention, a reminder of battles fought silently, a story she carried without speaking it aloud. A sudden laugh broke the quiet, the sound of children chasing each other along the riverbank. Sani's laughter followed them, soft and melodic, threading through the trees. Darian's gaze lingered on her as she bent to steady a small child, her fingers brushing his hair back with care. His chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, yet another quieter instinct whispered that he could not look away. The afternoon sun rose high, warming the valley. Darian crouched low, shifting from rock to rock, observing the interactions between Sani and the villagers. She commanded attention without commanding it, a subtle authority that left no room for defiance. A man approached her, bringing news of a trap that had failed. Sani listened, nodded, and offered instructions with calm precision. Darian felt a flicker of admiration, begrudging and reluctant, for the clarity in her mind and the strength in her heart. As the day wore on, Darian's presence remained unseen. He had crossed valleys and ridges, learned to be silent in the forest, yet the simplicity of watching her stirred an unfamiliar ache. He was torn between his mission, the purpose he had been born into, and the impossible pull she exerted on him. He had never questioned his orders, never doubted the path laid before him. Yet Sani made everything uncertain. By dusk, the village gathered around a fire, sharing stories and songs. Sani's voice rose, commanding yet tender, captivating everyone around her. Darian observed from a distance, hidden in the shadows of the trees, every note of her song resonating in his chest. He had crossed hundreds of miles to kill her people, yet he found himself wishing to step into the firelight, to speak to her, to simply exist near her without causing harm. The night deepened, stars blanketing the sky in silver, and Darian remained in the forest, torn between duty and desire. He could feel the weight of his own conflict pressing down on him, a storm of loyalty, honor, and something he dared not name. Sani, unaware of the man watching from the shadows, tended to the fire and her people, her face serene, radiant in the glow of the flames. Every flicker of light highlighted the strength in her jaw, the determination in her dark eyes, the grace in her posture. Darian's hand, once steady, trembled as he clenched his fists. The mission that had driven him across mountains and valleys now felt hollow, meaningless in comparison to the presence of this woman who commanded his attention so completely. As the night deepened, Darian made a choice he would not articulate to anyone. He would not strike, not today, not tomorrow. He would watch, learn, and wait. The mission could not be abandoned lightly, but Sani had stirred something within him that no order, no command, no threat could suppress, and so he remained, hidden in the shadows, a soldier caught between duty and the inexplicable pull of a woman who had unknowingly captured his heart. The sun had barely risen when Darien found himself moving through the forest, closer to the village than he had ever dared before. Shadows clung to him like a second skin, and his breath was measured, controlled. Every step was deliberate, silent, a predator observing. But unlike his usual hunts, the prey was not just a person. It was the impossible pull he felt toward Sani, the one woman whose presence made his mission crumble like dry clay. Sani was already awake, standing near the river, her long black hair catching the faint pink of dawn. Her dress, adorned with beads and feathers, glimmered subtly as she tilted her head to listen to the river's song. She moved with ease, graceful and deliberate, and Darien felt a strange ache in his chest as he watched her. He had trained to detach from everything, emotion, hesitation, but she made detachment impossible. He edged closer, ducking behind a stand of tall grass and rocks. She was unaware, humming softly to herself as she arranged stones along the riverbank to create a small dam for the water. Each motion was careful, methodical, yet there was a natural rhythm to it, a harmony that drew his gaze like a magnet. Suddenly, a branch snapped under his foot, and Sani's head shot up. Her dark eyes scanned the forest. For a moment, Darien froze, every muscle taut. Then, after a heartbeat, she relaxed and returned to her work, her hands moving as if she had felt the forest shift, but knew it posed no threat. The subtle awareness in her movements, her instincts, impressed him more than any skill he had ever witnessed in battle. The day grew warmer, and Darien followed her at a careful distance. He watched as she visited the communal garden, tending to rows of corn and squash. Her fingers brushed the leaves, delicate yet firm, and she spoke softly to the plants, a song that made the earth seem to respond. Villagers passed by, exchanging greetings, but Sani's attention remained on the work and the people around her, never faltering. Darien's own mind was a battlefield. He had been sent to kill her people, yet the thought of harming her or anyone near her twisted his stomach with a foreign, unwelcome emotion. He found himself cataloging her features, the curve of her jaw, the smoothness of her skin, the way her dark eyes held both fire and calm simultaneously. He tried to focus on strategy, on his orders, but every rational thought collided with the truth he could not deny. She fascinated him, unsettled him, and perhaps terrified him more than any enemy ever had. By late afternoon, a sudden storm gathered over the valley, clouds rolling in thick and fast. Sani did not falter, gathering her people and helping children into huts, guiding the women to secure the crops and livestock. Darien crouched low, hidden in the tree line, and observed her. Each instruction she gave was precise, clear, but never harsh. There was authority in her presence, yes, but it was tempered with care, a nurturing command that made him question everything he thought he knew about leadership and strength. As the rain began to fall, Darien noticed her pause to adjust a child's cloak. Their eyes met for a brief instant, and though he stayed hidden, he felt a shiver run through him. He wanted to move, to step forward and speak, but the rules of the mission and the rigid discipline of his life kept him rooted to the spot, yet the pull was undeniable. Hours passed, and the storm did not relent. Darien remained in the shadows, watching as Sani guided her people through the rain, her dress plastered to her form, her hair wet and clinging to her face. The sight was mesmerizing, the storm highlighting her every movement, every expression, every subtle detail of her beauty and strength. He could feel the tension coiling tighter in his chest. That night, after the storm subsided, Sani tended to the fire, gathering the villagers around. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke, the forest alive with the chorus of night creatures. She sang again, soft and haunting, each note carrying across the trees, wrapping around Darien like a living thing. He remained in the shadows, unseen, yet every note struck a chord deep within him. Then, as if drawn by fate, she moved closer to the edge of the clearing, carrying a small lantern. Darien's breath caught as she knelt near the river, washing the day's dirt and rain from her hands. Her dark eyes caught the flicker of the lantern, glimmering like obsidian. He imagined stepping forward, but the weight of his orders grounded him. Still, he could not leave. He could not pull himself away. Minutes stretched into hours, and Darian stayed, mesmerized, torn between longing and duty. He watched her rise, tuck a stray lock of wet hair behind her ear, and glance toward the forest, as if sensing him without seeing him. A strange, almost electric anticipation filled the air, the unspoken, invisible connection that neither dared to name. He realized something he had never admitted to anyone. He could not complete his mission if it meant harming her. And yet he did not know how to approach her, how to reconcile the man who had been trained to destroy with the man who now wanted nothing more than to protect her, to be near her. As the night deepened and the stars glittered above, Darian made a silent vow. He would remain, he would observe, and he would learn her, the real her, not just the image of a target or a legend. He would find a way to exist in the space between duty and desire, even if it broke him in the process. Because in the depths of his chest, in the place he had long thought empty and hardened by violence, Sani had planted a seed of something dangerous, something irresistible, and he knew, with terrifying clarity, that nothing would ever be the same again. The forest was silent in the early morning, mist curling through the trees like drifting smoke. Darian moved carefully, stepping over roots and low branches, every sense alert. He had spent days observing the village, memorizing its rhythms, its patterns, and above all, Sani. And yet, every moment he watched her, he found himself more unprepared for the effect she had on him. Sani was at the river again, her movements precise as she gathered water for the village. Her long black hair fell across her shoulders, damp from the morning dew, and her dark eyes scanned the riverbank with calm authority. She seemed to exist in perfect harmony with her surroundings, every gesture deliberate yet effortless, commanding attention without demanding it. Darian crouched behind a ridge, studying her, noting the faint scar along her neck, the small scar along her forearm, and the subtle grace in how she lifted each clay pot with ease. He had been sent to kill, to bring destruction to her people, and yet the thought of harming her made his stomach twist in a way that was entirely foreign. She was not just a target. She was a force that unsettled him, awakened something he did not understand. By mid-morning, Sani began walking along a narrow path through the forest, carrying a small bundle of herbs. Darian followed at a careful distance, ducking behind trees and low brush. He had memorized every detail of her movements, the way her fingers brushed the leaves, the subtle sway of her hips, the slight tilt of her head when she listened to the wind. It was mesmerizing. Then, without warning, she paused. Her dark eyes flicked toward the forest, sharp and alert. Darian froze, holding his breath. For a moment she seemed to sense his presence, though she could not see him. She knelt and picked up a fallen feather, examining it closely, before tucking it behind her ear. The gesture was small, but it sent an unexpected jolt through him, as if she had unknowingly reached into the hidden corners of his mind. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light through the trees. Darian remained hidden, but he found it increasingly difficult to think of anything other than her. The air seemed charged, taut with an unspoken tension. Every laugh, every glance, every small motion she made pulled at him in ways he could not control. By afternoon, Sani approached a clearing where a small deer had become trapped in a snare. Her movements were calm but deliberate, as she knelt and gently freed the animal, speaking softly to it, in a tone that blended authority with care. Darian watched, captivated. He had fought countless battles, yet never had he witnessed such a combination of strength and gentleness in one person. The image of her, crouched in the sunlight with the deer trembling in her hands, burned itself into his mind. He realized with a jolt that he had stopped thinking of the mission entirely. The orders, the training, the reason he had come here. It all seemed irrelevant compared to the pull Sani exerted over him. And yet, there was fear tangled with desire. She was untouchable in her confidence, yet entirely human in the subtle vulnerabilities she revealed without knowing. He was a man divided, a soldier torn between duty and the strange, growing need to protect, to simply be near her. Night fell, and the village gathered around a fire. Darian remained hidden in the forest, watching Sani as she moved among the villagers. Her laughter rang clear and pure, her voice soft but commanding. Children huddled around her, trusting her completely. While the adults respected her presence without question, she had a natural authority that did not demand obedience. It inspired it. As the firelight flickered over her face, Darian's gaze lingered on her eyes, the depth and clarity of them, the way they seemed to pierce through the shadows of the night. He felt something unfamiliar, a longing that was sharp and dangerous. He had trained to suppress emotions, to act with precision and detachment. But she made him question every principle he had ever followed. The air shifted, carrying the scent of rain from the approaching storm. Sani glanced up toward the darkening sky, and Darian felt a strange pang of desire to warn her, to reach out and offer protection, even though he could not yet risk revealing himself. It was a dangerous impulse, one that went against everything he had been taught, yet he could not resist. The storm arrived with a suddenness that matched the tension in his chest. Rain pelted the village, drenching Sani and the villagers, yet she did not falter. She guided the people to shelter, her movements precise, deliberate, and commanding without a hint of fear. Darian remained in the shadows, watching her every motion, his admiration and frustration intertwining. She was everything he could not have imagined. Strong, beautiful, untouchable, and yet entirely capable of awakening something raw and uncontrollable within him. Hours passed, and as the storm subsided, Sani returned to the river to check the water levels. She paused at the edge, gazing at the reflection of the moon in the rippling current. Darian's breath caught. She was breathtaking, radiant in the silver light, long black hair damp and clinging to her shoulders, golden brown skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her dark eyes seemed to hold the entire night within them, a silent challenge and an invitation all at once. For the first time, Darian felt the depth of his own vulnerability. He could no longer deny the pull she had over him, the way she made every instinct he had trained for irrelevant. He could not kill her. He could not even think of harming anyone in her presence. And yet, he remained in the shadows, torn between revealing himself and remaining hidden, watching, aching, longing. He made a silent vow that night, one that he could not voice to anyone. He would remain, he would watch, and he would find a way to understand her, to be near her without destroying the delicate balance between duty and desire. He did not yet know how, but he knew that nothing would ever allow him to walk away from this woman again. Because Sani had changed everything. She had become the force that challenged him, unsettled him, and awakened something deep within him. Something more dangerous than any enemy, more irresistible than any command. And Darian realized with both fear and exhilaration that he was already lost. The forest was quiet, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth after the storm. Darian moved through the undergrowth with practiced silence, every step measured, every sense alert. He had spent days tracking Sani's movements, learning the patterns of her life. Yet each observation left him more unsettled. Her presence had a way of unraveling him, loosening the tightly bound control he had relied on for years. Sani was at the river, her silhouette framed against the silver shimmer of water under the early morning sun. She knelt at the edge, washing the herbs she had gathered, her fingers nimble and precise. Her long black hair fell across her shoulders, catching the sunlight in subtle glimmers. The small scar along her forearm was visible, a reminder of trials, endured silently, and it tugged at something deep within Darian, a mix of admiration, longing, and guilt. He lingered in the shadows, close enough to notice the intricate patterns of beads woven into her dress, the single feather tucked behind her ear. He had trained to notice every detail, every subtle movement of a target. Yet for Sani, Every observation carried a weight he had never experienced. She was more than a person to watch. She was an enigma, a force that made him question his purpose, his loyalty, and the very nature of the orders he had followed without hesitation. As she worked, a sudden noise, a deer leaping through the underbrush, made her head snap up. Her dark eyes scanned the forest with sharp awareness. Darian froze, heart hammering. She had sensed something, yet there was no fear in her stance, only quiet vigilance. Her gaze lingered toward the tree line where he hid, and for a fleeting moment, he felt exposed, vulnerable, as though she could see right through the shadows he used as cover. Hours passed. Darian followed her from a distance, careful to remain unseen. He watched as she helped children gather firewood, spoke softly to elders, and guided the women in preparing the day's meals. Her authority was quiet, but absolute, commanding attention without ever raising her voice. Each motion, each glance, each subtle gesture reinforced the pull she exerted over him, a pull he no longer resisted. By mid-afternoon, Sani approached a small clearing where a young girl had dropped a bundle of herbs. She knelt to retrieve it, brushing her hands over the girl's shoulders in a protective gesture. Darian's chest tightened. He had seen warriors fight in countless battles, yet never had he witnessed such a combination of strength, compassion, and grace in one person. His desire to reveal himself, to step forward and be near her, battled with the rigid discipline instilled in him since childhood. The sky began to darken with the approach of another storm. Sani guided the villagers to shelter, her movements precise, calm, and confident. Darian remained in the shadows, watching every interaction, feeling the growing ache of helplessness in his chest. He wanted to intervene, to protect her from danger, yet the risk of discovery and the weight of his mission kept him silent. Night fell and the village gathered around a fire once more. Sani's voice rose in song, soft yet commanding, weaving a melody that reached even into the forest where Darian hid. Each note resonated within him, stirring emotions he had long buried: longing, admiration, desire, and an unnameable vulnerability. Then, as if drawn by fate, Sani moved closer to the edge of the clearing, carrying a small lantern. Darian's breath caught. She knelt by the river, washing her hands in the cool water, her dark eyes catching the lantern's glow. The silver light highlighted the curve of her jaw, the strength in her shoulders, the grace in her posture. He felt a pull so strong it was nearly physical, a force that made every thought of duty and mission feel like ash in his mouth. In that moment, Darian realized the truth. He could not complete his mission if it meant harming her or anyone near her. The thought alone twisted his stomach with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had become the center of his world, the force that unsettled him, the presence that made every instinct he had trained for irrelevant. And yet, he could not approach her, not yet. The tension between them remained unspoken, electric, a dangerous current running just beneath the surface. He had watched her for days, memorized every detail, cataloged every movement, and still, the knowledge only deepened his longing, intensified the ache that had taken root in his chest. Darian made another silent vow as he retreated to the shadows of the forest. He would find a way to exist near her, to protect her, to understand her. He would not strike. He would not betray the pull of his own heart. He would wait, silently, patiently, until the right moment revealed itself, or until fate forced their paths together. Because Sani was no longer just a woman in a village. She was the axis around which his world now turned. Every choice he made, every breath he took, every hidden step through the forest was defined by her presence, and he knew, with both terror and exhilaration, that he would never be the same again. The forest was shrouded in mist, the pale light of dawn filtering through the towering pines. Darian moved silently, each step measured, his senses stretched taut with anticipation. He had followed Sani for weeks, memorizing every rhythm of her life, every gesture, every subtle nuance of her presence. Yet even now, he was unprepared for the intensity of what he felt. The pull, the ache, the undeniable weight of desire that had taken root deep within him. Sani was at the river again, as if drawn to its calm waters, kneeling to rinse the herbs she had collected. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders, glistening with dew. Her dark eyes scanned the riverbank, alert but serene. Golden brown skin glimmered faintly in the soft morning light, her traditional dress of beads and feathers moving gracefully with her every motion. The subtle scars on her forearm caught his gaze once more, silent testaments to the battles she had endured, visible only to those who observed closely. Darian crouched low behind a large oak, holding his breath. He wanted to approach her, to bridge the distance that had stretched between them like a taut wire for weeks, but fear and caution held him back. The mission that had brought him here, to destroy her people, was still alive in the back of his mind, yet it clashed violently with the impossible feelings that had grown beyond his control. The air shifted as a soft breeze rustled the leaves. Sani paused in her task, looking toward the forest with a subtle, almost imperceptible awareness. Their eyes met across the clearing. For a moment the world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them, the mist, and the river between them. Darian felt a jolt, a shiver that ran through his entire body. He realized that she had sensed him, not fully, not consciously, but in some way that transcended logic. Sani's gaze softened slightly, curiosity mixed with caution. Darian swallowed hard, the dry ache in his throat betraying the words he dared not speak. He wanted to step into the clearing, to speak, to reach out, yet the discipline of a lifetime of orders held him in place. Still, the tension between them was undeniable, electric, a current that neither could ignore. Minutes stretched, the silence heavy with unspoken emotion. Then, without moving closer, Sani bent to adjust the herbs, her movements slow and deliberate, almost teasing in their simplicity. Darian's chest tightened as he watched, each gesture imprinting itself deeper into his mind. He had known longing before, but this was something fiercer, sharper, and entirely consuming. The sun rose higher, scattering the mist and illuminating the clearing. Sani finally stood, brushing her hands over her dress, beads catching the light. She glanced toward the forest again, and this time, a faint smile played at the corners of her lips, a subtle acknowledgement that she had felt him there, hidden, watching. Darian's heart raced. He understood, in that single moment, that the impossible was within reach. The barrier between them, though still present, had cracked. He stepped forward, breaking the shadows, and she did not retreat. Instead, she held his gaze, steady and unwavering. Darian felt every rule, every command, every piece of training fall away. All that remained was the pull between them, raw and undeniable. He moved closer, each step measured, careful yet urgent. The space between them diminished until he could see the soft curve of her jaw, the depth of her dark eyes, the strength and warmth radiating from her golden brown skin. Words were unnecessary. The forest held its breath, the river's gentle babble the only witness. Darian extended his hand, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of every unspoken thought, every suppressed desire, every dangerous emotion that had built over weeks. Sani's fingers hovered near his, and then, with a quiet decisiveness, she allowed their hands to meet. The contact was electric, a spark that traveled from his chest to his fingertips. He had come to this village as a harbinger of death, a soldier trained to strike without hesitation, and yet now he found himself powerless in the presence of this woman. She was not just a target, not just a force of nature. She was the axis around which his world had shifted. For the first time, Darian let his mask fall away. He allowed himself to feel the depth of the longing, the respect, the admiration, and the undeniable pull of attraction that had grown unchecked for weeks. Sani did not flinch. Instead, she held his gaze, her own emotions a complex mix of curiosity, caution, and something that mirrored the longing he felt. They remained in that suspended moment, hands touching, eyes locked, hearts beating in a rhythm that neither had expected but both recognized. The world beyond the clearing, the mission, the orders, the danger, seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them and the fragile, electric connection that had built slowly, patiently, over time. Darian knew that this moment would not erase the challenges ahead. He could not abandon the duty that had defined him, and yet he could not deny the truth of what he felt. Sani had claimed a piece of him he had never known existed, a piece that hungered for connection, for closeness, for something more than war and obedience. As the morning sun broke fully through the mist, illuminating their entwined hands and the clearing around them, Darian and Sani stood in quiet acknowledgement of what had begun. A bond forged in tension, tempered by danger, and driven by a force neither could resist. The slow burn that had pulled them together over weeks had reached its first, undeniable climax. And though the future remained uncertain, filled with impossible choices, forbidden desires and looming threats, the moment was theirs. The pull between them was real, dangerous, and utterly consuming. The forest watched in silence as two souls, bound by fate and circumstance, took the first tentative step toward each other, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again.